Okay, so my idea that I wanted to do today, because normally I would just do this on my own and I would make all these decisions, is to kind of give you guys some insight and an overview on what it is that I'm working on. Give you a peek behind the curtain to see how I um, come up with the ideas, where I keep track of them, and then ultimately decide what short story I'm going to write essentially for the first time this year. So originally, I wanted to write one short story per month. January has done come and gone, and February is going to be gone in like another 9 days. So I don't know if I'm going to get to write a short story this month, but I'm damn well going to start somewhere. So last night, or I should say early this morning, I woke up feeling inspired and I went back to my Scrivener document where I've been keeping track of a collection of short stories that I want to write um, called Return to Twilight. And I decided to go through all of them and just see what I had, what I was missing, which ones I felt I could start working on right away, and then which ones I felt um, needed a bit more time. So, peeling back the curtain, here is my Scrivener document. So, you guys can basically see how I do what I do, and hopefully you can see this. Um, so this is actually my document of where I'm keeping all of the anthologies that I'm planning. So before I even show you Return to Twilight, let me show you essentially what I have here. So I've got one, two, three, four, five, six. So I essentially have um, six different collection ideas. So I've got my Anatomy of Typewriters. I've got One Big Teeth, which is okay. Jumping back, Anatomy of Typewriters is essentially a collection of short stories where each one of them features a typewriter in some way, shape, or form. Either it's a deadly weapon, it's more of a ghostly object. And there's many different ways in which a typewriter is featured in each of these stories. The next one is One Big Teeth, which this one is basically going to be a collection of fairy tale retelling. So I've got a few fairy tales. Let me see if I can get a little bit closer here without wobbling the camera too much so you guys can see this a bit better. Try to tilt this camera back a bit. Okay, it fall hopefully. Okay. So I've got One Big Teeth, which this one currently has about, I think, five or six. I'm not going to drop it down because there's a couple of spoilers in here I don't want to see. But there's about five or six different tellings that are nested in here. And I think when I release this collection, it will stay in that amount because each story is about 15 to 20,000 words a piece. So already it's going to be like a really long collection, even though it's just five stories. But that's just how it worked out. This is the one we're going to be looking at today, Return to Twilight, which is essentially my love letter to the Twilight Zone and all that I love about the Twilight Zone. But I want to quickly go into the other two. So one of them is this one I just did randomly like a few weeks ago after reading one of my Twilight Zone books, but this one is Erica Drayton's Wack Museum, and I won't go into too many details, but it's an idea that originated from Rod Sterling, excuse me, that I picked up on. Um, okay, the next one is Dead Paper, which this came from. There's a classic book called Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins uh, Gilman, who I read this short story recently, and there was a point in there that had to do with dead paper, um, where she says, I have the quote here, I would not say it to a living soul, of course, but this is dead paper and a great relief to my mind. So essentially, she treats this journal that she has to write down what's happening to her. She treats it as dead paper because in her mind, no one else is going to read what she's writing. No one else is going to read her crazy rants and raves and ravings. So she feels free to relieve her mind and just put it all on the page because she knows that this is uh, pages and this is, a journal that no one else is going to ever see. And I know just how crazy she's becoming as she is um, essentially being kept in this room. And then the last one is views from a window, which I am fascinated by the movie Rear Window. I always have been. And I wanted to do a collection where essentially a woman is, uh, for reasons I haven't figured out yet, but she's living in a sort of a tenement house that's similar to Rear Window, where there's all of these buildings that back into each other, creating a square in the middle. And she's able to see into certain apartments, and she witnesses a lot of different things, either deadly or um, a mystery or any number of things. And so this is her collection of stories from the point of view of this one woman looking out her window. Um, I don't really have that one fleshed out yet. These are in order of potentially what I want to release, although I think I'm going to end up moving Return to Twilight up here and release this one first, then Anatomy of Typewriters, then Fairy Tale Retellings. Um, and then eventually in the coming years, I'll look at the other three collections. So now I want to back up a bit. Because now I want to get a little bit into the nitty gritty of what I've got in terms of Return to Twilight. So I started writing an introduction here, um, which just gonna fix my zooming for a minute here. It zoomed in a bit too much. Okay. So I started working on an intro for the book, and then I started coming up with some original ideas for myself. So um, one of the things that I did, and I can read it to you right now, um, because I don't mind, but I was thinking of, in the Twilight Zone episodes, Rod Serling has an opening that he says, and there's about three or four different openings across the 5 seasons of his original Twilight Zone series that he did. And I was thinking, what kind of opening would I want? What would I hear in my mind as I pay homage to the Twilight Zone in this book, Return to Twilight? And so this is what I've come up with so far, and I like it, and I think it's going to stay. I don't know if I'm going to end up changing it at any point. Um, Let me just slide this over a bit. Okay, so picture, if you will, a highway leading to the shadowy tip of reality. You're on a route to the land of the different, the bizarre, the unexplainable. You remember going as far as you like on this road. Its limits are only those of the mind itself. Ladies and gentlemen, you're re entering the wondrous, the familiar dimension of imagination. Next stop, return to twilight. So that's what just an opening line. So that'll probably be, I actually wrote it here so that I remind myself I want to put these two little paragraphs after the table of contents page, but before the first story. So, um, you know how some books will have like a quote and it'll just be by itself on a blank page. So this is going to be that thing that I'm just going to put there, and then you can start reading each of the stories. Now, um, moving this back over a bit, I do have 15, I believe, stories here. So they're each nested here. Um, and I'm going to go through just the ones that are ready, but just to really quickly, one of the other things that I did, um, because I wanted to pay homage to Twilight Zone, but I didn't want to step on the toes of the stories that people know and recognize, because then they might have uh, I don't want to say negative things to say, but they may not appreciate um, my twist and my take and my change to that one. So I wanted to see what were the best or highly rated episodes. So these are a list for myself of the 30 best episodes that has the description of it, the opening narration that he says, and then the closing narration. Now, having an opening and closing narration is something that's very signature to Rod Serling. And I haven't decided yet if I want to do that. I think I might be satisfied with just having that cold open for Return to Twilight. I don't know if I'm going to go the extra step and have an opening narration and a closing narration that would be almost like if I were Rod Serling talking directly to the reader. While I like the idea and I think it's very cool, we'll see if I can pull something like that off. But the reason why I have this here is because if I decided to choose one of these stories, I wanted to make sure that I either avoided them. Honestly, it's really here, so I avoid these stories. But if I choose one of them, that I do a good job of it and I know what the story is about. I know what he said in the beginning, what he said at the end, and what my idea would be to twist it wouldn't be taken too terribly. But I will say that of all of these here that I'm looking to touch on, a few of them are on this list, but they've been moved down to my baby because again, I'm a little concerned that if I were to put my spin and twist on it, um, that lovers of the Twilight Zone may not appreciate it. So, and I think it's even more of a challenge for me to take stories that I love all of them. I love all the Twilight Zone episodes, but to take ones that are not as um, popular as the others and do a bit of a twist on them. So here are uh, the eight that are now. I don't know if you can see this, but what I did was I went through each one and I designated for myself which ones are ready. Now, if it says ready next to it, it means it's got a couple things. One, it's got a new title. I didn't want to take the original title of the story. I wanted to change the title. So it's got its own title. It has its own synopsis and it's got an outline. So as long as I have those things, then it's ready. Now, for an outline, that means that it has the character and then the story beginning, middle, and end. So I know how it starts, I know where I want it to go, and I know how I want it to end. Ending is important when you're doing something like this because you need it to have pack as much of a punch as the original Twilight Zone episodes, right? So I need to make sure that I've got those things in place before I will consider it ready enough for me to go ahead and write the story. Okay, so let's go through the eight. So my hope by the end of me talking this out, either with you're more than welcome to leave a comment. I see some people have come in or not. Leave a comment down below, and I will be able to see it. But essentially, I want to just talk out loud, and this is something that I would do even if I wasn't live on stream. Like I would literally sit here by myself, talking to myself like a loony bin, to try and figure out which one I want to write first because essentially I love them all. I went as far as coming up with the idea, title, writing an outline. So clearly they're all going to get written, but which one do I start? It's not as simple as saying, well, I'll just start with the first one, because one might speak to me more than the others. And I will tell you that the first one up here, A World of Her Own, was the one I was going to write first. I edited it, but originally it had January up here in the title. Like I was ready. I was like, okay, this is the one. This is the story that's going to come out in January. A whole bunch of things happened. That didn't happen. So, A World of Her Own was originally the episode A World of His Own. Now, I don't know if you guys are going to remember any of these, but I'll do it very quickly. The idea is that there's a writer who demonstrates he can control reality simply by dictating changes. So he has sort of a recorder, and he realizes that whatever he speaks into the recorder, which is in his case, he's a fiction writer, or he's a writer of novels, and so he dictates it so that his secretary can type it out, and um, he can, have his manuscript. But he discovered that whatever he speaks into his recorder becomes real. Um, and so I'm reimagining this, first of all, by changing the writer from male to female. Actually, no, I'm sorry. By changing um, the narrative of the story. So originally, it's that the writer speaks into the recorder and it comes true. In this case, that's not what happens. Without being too giving away too much of the twist, the writer is still a guy, and his secretary is sick, and she doesn't come into work this particular day. And so he's left to try to figure out how he's going to continue writing without his secretary being there to take notes, which is what he's used to. And his wife goes off to um, go shopping or whatever the case may be. So he decides, let me see if I can find like pen and paper. Like this guy doesn't even have that stuff. Like he doesn't know where any of that stuff is. He's a very bougie type of writer where he just expects his secretary to bring all the supplies she needs to get down whatever she needs to get down so that he can give it to his editor and all of that jazz. So he goes up into the attic and he finds the recorder. He brings the recorder down and he discovers when he speaks to it that these things are coming to life, and he freaks out because he's like, oh my God, what is going on? Um, I won't give away the ending. You could probably guess what the ending is going to be, considering it's called A World of Her Own. Um, but that's my idea of a bit of a twist on that story. And as I'm talking it out to you now, it's making me realize, maybe I do want to start with that one because I really just, the idea just came to me. Okay. Um, so now the next one is All That Was Needed. And I don't, for some reason, have what the original title was for this story, but that the original title is not All That Was Needed, it is something else. But this one has to do with, there's this peddler who brings you things um, that you need in order to um, help you either immediately or in the near future. And this guy who's down and out on his luck sees that this man does this and harasses him, but then he ends up getting his own karma back at him. Um, I won't go. I actually, you know what? I can't even tell you what my twist is for this one because it's too much of a twist. I'm just gonna put that over. But that's the next one, which as I'm saying it right now, I'm kind of gonna move it down. I'm gonna try to put these in order, which ones I'm more likely gonna want to do and which ones not. So let's move that one down to the bottom of the ready stack. Okay, so now we've got the walkie-talkies, which the original is long distance calling. The idea of this is um, a boy who really, really loves his grandmother receives a toy phone from her as a present, and then she dies. Boy starts talking into the phone, and he's talking to his grandmother who's dead, um, which is kind of cool and also kind of creepy. Um, so I'm reimagining it to be present day of like, what if he's given by his grandfather a walkie-talkie and he's talking to his grandfather literally from the grave. His grandfather's buried, but he's talking to him um, through the grave. And the way that happens is when no one's watching during the wake, the boy takes one of the walkie-talkies and slips it into the casket. Um, but what ends up happening is they end up going to look for the boy when he goes missing, and they discover that the grandfather's grave is dug up. So the grandfather's body is missing. There's no walkie-talkies there. The boy is missing. Um, yeah. So that's my idea for the next one, which I still really like. Um, this one, I okay. So the next one is Nick of Time. This one is on the top 30 popular ones. You might know this one just because it's got William Shatner. So the William Shatner episodes of The Twilight Zone are always popular. Nick of Time is one where him and his, I want to say girlfriend, I don't think they're married. They're traveling somewhere, their car breaks down, they go to a mechanic. It's going to take some time for the car to get fixed. So they go to a diner to wait. At the diner is one of those machines that tells you the future, it tells you whatever, um, a fortune telling machine, that's what it is. And so he's constantly using the fortune telling machine, asking it like really basic questions, which is keeping them there. And the girlfriend is like saying, let's go. And he's like asking it, like, will this happen? Should we do this? Should we do that? Um, and he's getting like really crazed about it. So my idea is when they leave, right at the end of that episode, there's a couple that comes in right behind them and goes to the fortune telling machine to say, is it safe for us to leave now? Right? So in my mind, I want to know about that couple. Who is that couple that ends up never leaving? Like the William Shatner character and his girlfriend, they go through this whole thing and then they end up leaving the Twilight Zone. But what about the couple that clearly was there before them and gets trapped in this cycle of not leaving? And for me, I wanted to change it. So it's not a couple, it's actually a brother and sister. And my idea is the brother and sister are traveling to meet their mom who's dying. And one of them, I haven't decided which, but one of the brother or sister who gets trapped in this cycle doesn't want to leave because they realize as long as they stay, the mother doesn't die. Whereas the other one is kind of like, can we get out of here? Let's just go do what we gotta do, blah, blah, blah. And so they're stuck in this cycle. Um, and I do want it to, my story, the idea I have, and when the two, like William Shatner and his girlfriend character arrive, and then they leave, and then they come and they ask the thing like, "Is it safe to leave now?" Like I want that ending to happen, but I want to look at the two people that are trapped in the fortune teller cycle at the diner. That's what I want my focus to be, and I call it almost too late. I had several different titles just in time under the wire, but I like almost too late the best, so that's the one I'm going with. Love that idea. Now, here's another one where I am taking a most beloved episode of the Twilight Zone, so I'm a little nervous about doing this one. But it's the story that's It's a Good Life. Now, It's a Good Life is the one with the little boy who can read your mind. And so if you're thinking terrible things, he will send you to the cornfields. This is one of those episodes where at the time when it was released, parents were outraged, adults were outraged. CBS received tons of letters and phone calls from family not appreciating this episode, the way it was portrayed with this kid being essentially the devil. In any event, I have an idea that I've been mulling around for years now, where um, what's always fascinated me about this particular episode is not the boy, but I believe she's the aunt in this episode where she's kind of got a couple of screws loose. But there's a moment, just a brief moment in the entire episode where there seems to be a slight hint of fear between the boy who has all these powers and his aunt, who now seems to have gone off her rocker and is a little bit crazy. So people are constantly like looking after her and making sure she doesn't say anything that she shouldn't say or think anything that she shouldn't think because, you know, bad things can happen. Um, and so the title would be It Was Never a Good Life. And the reason why I want to call it that is because I'm thinking, what if That woman, the aunt who's now a little bit crazy, actually was the one who had the power, similar to what the boy has. And for whatever reason, it shifted, and the boy ended up with the power. And she is now a little bit kooky and crazy, but unlike everyone else that he's able to just send to the cornfields, he's not able to send her for whatever that reason may be. And while people are terrified of him, they're even more terrified of her. Um, so I want to look at it from that point of view. I want to go to the moment where he gets the power and she loses it. So I want to look at her story, and take it from her point of view, so that the idea is like, yeah, um, it was like, sure, it's bad right now with this boy who has all this power to send people that he doesn't like to the cornfields. It was never a good life, even before this happened with him, because they were dealing with her. Um, so that's my idea for that one. Next. This one is, the original episode of The Twilight Zone is Little Girl Lost. Now, this one is, and I debated whether or not I wanted to do a twist on this, but I came up with one, and so I was like, okay, let's re-examine this episode, which is there's a father who tells his daughter a story, and she ends up um, disappearing, and she's calling for the dad to come. She's scared, and he thinks that she's hiding under the bed, and he looks under the bed and she's not there. Oh my God, she's missing. He discovers that for whatever reason, she went through the wall. So now he's feeling up on the wall. He's able to pass through the wall. And essentially, he's feeling around, feeling around. He grabs her and he pulls her back. Great. Now, here's my idea, which is a little bit like if you've ever seen the movie Us. Um, which I didn't think about it at the time, but now I'm realizing it might be a little bit like that. What if, and this is why I want to call it Little Girl Found, what if there's an opposite of you in this other dimension through the wall? So my idea is that he, the father, reaches in and he's reaching around, but instead of pulling through his daughter, he pulls through the other version of his daughter. And the only thing in the house that knows that something is off is the dog. They have a pet dog, and the dog is like barking, and he knows the truth. Um, so my idea is what happens when his original daughter is trapped on the other side, and this other girl comes, is pulled through, and he thinks that he's rescued her. Um, so it's almost like a changing of the original endings. I don't discount or dislike the idea of how it starts. It's just the ending is just a little too happy for me. So I was thinking in along those lines. And I'm not married to writing that one, so I am going to move it down. Okay, so here's the next one, which is from the original Twilight Zone passage on the Lady Anne. Now, this one's interesting. A couple who are fighting and on the brink of divorce go on this cruise ship that's supposed to be like a romantic cruise ship to bring them together. And they discover quickly that everyone on this cruise ship is really old. Now, when I first saw this episode, immediately my mind started thinking of where it could possibly go. And it doesn't really go where I wanted it to go. So, with a lot of the Twilight Zone episodes, I tend to do that. I'm watching it, almost as if it's the first time, and I'm thinking, oh man, why didn't it go there? Right? Like there's a place where it should go, where it should end, um, but it just doesn't. So my idea is to now I renamed it to the King's Ransom. So I renamed the ship essentially, where it's no longer called the Lady Anne, it's called the King's Ransom. Um, so I want to retain the idea of this couple that goes on this ship. Everyone there is old, but I want to change it up a bit. because it's a again it's not it doesn't go to the scariest depths that it can go. So what if it turns out they were tricked to end up on this cruise? They think that they win a cruise, um, this love cruise, but actually they didn't. When they get there, they notice everyone's old. They become friends with a specific elderly couple there. Um, and then, so here's the clincher. The reason why um, they get tricked to go on this cruise ship is because the passengers on there are these old people who, as long as they stay on the ship, they live forever, but they do age. And so they can trade bodies with young people who come on the ship. And so they end up like a body swap situation where they end up on trapped on the ship in the bodies of this old couple, and then the old couple end up in the bodies of this young couple, and they get to leave, and they get on a lifeboat, and they drift away, and when they look back, the ship that they were once on disappears, because this is a the King's Ransom ship is actually a ship that only exists essentially in the Twilight Zone, where it'll appear and disappear at random places, picking up these young, unsuspecting couples, so that these people who are trapped on it can switch bodies um, and return to the real world and not be trapped on this uh, hell hellscape ship, if you will, on this paradise cruise. Um, so yeah, so that's the King's Ransom. You like that one? Yeah, I like that one too, because that's what I thought was gonna happen. And every time I watch the episode, I have to remind myself that that's not what's gonna happen. But I feel like that's what should have happened. Um, so it was just so disappointing for me that I'm like, you know what? I can redo it if I want. Who's gonna stop me? Okay. So the last one in the ready, we've already gone over seven of them, if you could believe it. So this is the eighth one, where, and this one I love. The acting is to me almost on the same level as Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. If you've never seen it, you should. It's Robert Taylor and Elizabeth. Robert Taylor, why did I say that? That's not right. It's Elizabeth Taylor and her husband at the time, whose name now escapes me because I just said Robert Taylor. But in any event, the acting in this from the husband and wife, every time I see it, reminds me of them immediately. Um, so what's in the box is this couple where the guy is like I think he's a taxi driver, and he flirts with a young passenger. But anyway, his wife is just constantly nagging him, constantly getting on him, all of these things. And in the middle of them constantly bickering, a guy comes over to fix the TV that's broken, and the wife is nagging at him about that. And when he fixes the TV, um, the, the, the husband character says something mean to him. I forget what. And so the guy, not pleased with how he's just been treated, does something a little wonky to the TV, and he makes it so that every time the husband looks at the TV, he's seeing into the future, and the future that he's seeing is that he ends up killing his wife by pushing her out the window. Okay, so my twist. I love this one, and because I love it so much, and I think it's so great the way it is, I almost don't want to touch it and don't want to do a twist on it. But it's called "Don't Touch That Dial." Um, So in this one, the only real twist I wanted to make is instead of the man being the one who's seeing the future, is that it's the wife. Um, and she's the one who's constantly bickering and nagging, still like the original with her husband. But what happens is the TV repairman is actually someone who does what this man does in the original, but intentionally, and whoever hires him knows it. So the husband, who's sick and tired of his wife nagging him, tips a little bit extra to the TV repair guy so that he can quote unquote fix the TV before he leaves. Um, Hold on, I gotta take a sip. And what she ends up seeing on the TV is she ends up seeing herself going insane from work, from being overworked and everything. Um, and she's she can't take the insanity of what she's seeing herself become on the TV, that she ends up essentially taking her own life. Um, and she keeps in this one, I wanted that they both can actually see what's happening on the TV. Whereas in the original one, he's seeing these things play out, but conveniently, his wife is always nagging at him from the other room, across the hall, whatever. And so, whenever he calls her over to say, "Come see this," she comes to the TV and it's just a regular show, it's a regular commercial. She's not seeing what he's seeing. In this one, I wanted that the husband can see exactly what she's seeing, but he's pretending that he can't. And so she's saying, like, "Oh my God, look, I'm going crazy. Can you see this? Blah, blah, blah." And he's like, "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just seeing, this regular TV show." Um, and then what happens? Well, I won't go into the twist because that's not even the twist. Um, but yeah, don't touch that top. So now that's all eight of them. Now I have to pick one of those eight to write right now. Um, and while I let that ruminate in my mind, I want to talk about the ones that are near the bottom. So I've got four also that I want to write, but two of them are brand new, meaning that they don't come from an actual Twilight Zone episode that's been filmed and aired. And then there's two of them that do come from a Twilight Zone episode, but they don't have a title yet. So I have an outline. I just haven't retitled them yet. So let's look at those briefly. One of them is called The Happy Place. Now, in this one, um, believe it or not, it's the second pilot episode that Rod wrote, but they tabled it. So he wrote several Twilight Zone episodes, and he had to take it to CBS at the time to decide which one they wanted to film. One of them they filmed, one of them they didn't. The one that they didn't film, which he wanted it to be the pilot episode of the Twilight Zone, is called The Happy Place. And the idea, it's about a world where people reach the age of 60, they go to what's called the Happy Place, which is essentially a concentration camp that exterminates them. What I found crazy about this one is I had written a short story many moons ago, called "The Eternal View." Now, the idea behind the eternal view is that it takes place in the future where there's this building that's like 300 stories high, whatever you want to call it, and it's called the eternal view. And what happens is people, when they reach a certain age, they are they go to this building, they get on the elevator, and it takes them on what essentially is the last ride of their life, where once they reach the top, they must willingly jump off, and they jump off basically like the roof of this building down to their deaths. And what happens is, um, this guy who's been in an accident that would essentially kill him. He won't survive this accident, but he's awake enough that they don't euthanize you or anything like that. You have to willingly kill yourself. He ends up on this elevator with a really old woman who's also on this elevator ready to go. And when you go on this elevator, you get a companion, and this companion is the one who explains, you know, talks you through your life, helps you remember, and basically, they say you see your life flashing before your eyes. So that's what this companion is meant to do. And when they, reach the top, they jump off with you. Um, so this guy, unfortunately, as a part of the accident that he has amnesia. So he doesn't even remember the world that he's living in, where he signed this contract that said if you end up, with a disease that's going to kill you, and an accident that you would have resulted in your death, or you reach a certain age, you willingly ch- you go to the eternal view, you jump. And so it shows the juxtaposition between this old woman who's lived a long life and she's ready to go. And this guy who can't remember that he signed this ridiculous contract and is trying to figure out how he can get off this elevator, how he can make it stop, how he can make it go down, how he cannot end up jumping. And in my idea for the eternal view, there's actually three different endings, three or four different endings. I have to look it up when I pull that outline. But so you can decide, because I couldn't figure out. I was like, how do I make this story end? Do I make it end that he figures out a way to get off the elevator? Um, do I make it end that he realizes by looking at this old woman who's ready, willing to, jump off the edge of this cliff because she's lived such a long life that he just does the same thing with her? Like, there's so many endings for this. But the second I read the idea of the happy place, where it's like a concentration camp that where they exterminate them, it made me immediately remember the eternal view. So I'm thinking I'm going to take that story, which I don't think I've ever shared anywhere, and turn it into the happy place and rewrite it in just a much better way. But anyway, so that's the happy place. Next one is the hoarder. Now this comes from almost like a true story that uh, my wife has. This She's on Facebook all the time, and Facebook has these groups, and one of the groups has to do with where you can trade things with people that you no longer need, but it's still pretty good. And so if you're looking for something, they will um, give it away. And so there's this woman who happens to be in this group who drives my wife crazy, where she's always talking about some grandson and everything that people are putting out to say, I don't want this anymore, I'm giving it away. She's always relating it back to her grandson. And I think what pisses my wife off more than the fact that she is constantly trying to get things from people for free for her grandson is that her grandson doesn't even live here. He lives in another state and he only visits like once every 3 months. But anyway, it gave me the idea for this story called The Hoarder. And my idea is that this woman who's constantly looking for items that people are giving away in an online forum for her grandson. Um, but the items that she's collecting bothers one person who questions whether this grandson even exists, right? Because she's like, there's this one person who's in these forums with this woman and sees all the things that she's collecting and starts, keeping a personal log for herself. And she's like, how is it possible that she's collecting all of these things and she's claiming that her grandson comes to visit to use them? So she's clearly not giving them to her grandson to take back wherever he lives. Um, so she sets a trap where she's giving something away so that the old woman can come to her house and then she could follow her back to where she lives. And what ends up happening um, is more than she bargained for. But it's basically called an order. Um, and it's a idea that I think would sit perfectly within the Twilight Zone universe. And when I do this collection, I wanted to put in there at least one or two stories that are not taken directly from a Twilight Zone episode, but that would fit in one. Um, and I think The Hoarder is one of them. I'm not married to that title, so I might change it. We'll see. Okay, so the next two, real quickly, I have the After Hours. Now, that one is another popular one where it's the mannequin twist. I'm giving away the twist ending, y'all. So there's this woman who's looking for, I believe, a thimble, and she's in this huge department store, like a Macy's type store, and she's, looking for this thimble, and she's walking around. She's really pretty, classy, nice dress, and then you find out at the end when she, for whatever reason, ends up falling asleep in some office or something, and she wakes up and the whole store is closed, she finds out that she's actually a mannequin who gets to come to life and basically be free for like a day. Um, and so my idea, okay, because I wanted to change this, but I don't have a title, which is why it's not up in the ready section. Let me read to you what I wrote. You tell me what you think. So, a woman desperate to find a toy that her son wants finds herself in a rather odd department store in the middle of nowhere. It seems ordinary enough with other customers and workers milling about, but she soon discovers something isn't quite right. Turns out everyone in the store are mannequins. They lure one unsuspecting real person into their store in order to steal their soul. Maybe there is one mannequin who thinks that what they do is wrong and tries to help her escape. Another idea is she goes to this department store with her son, and for the first time, um, the first time, the one mannequin child they have will have an opportunity to be real. Um, so I like either idea where either they take the soul of the mother or the mother and the son end up going to this department store and they have this one child mannequin who's now so excited because they rarely ever are able to get um, a child into their store now has one and they can take that soul um, of the boy. It sort of reminded me a little bit of Changeling. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie with Angelina Jolie. It's a really good one. Anyway, so there's the After Hours. I would have to come up with a different title for that before I would feel that it's ready for me to write. Then we have The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. Now, this was one that was a hugely controversial one where for a while it wasn't even allowed to be in syndication. Um, there were two episodes that were not allowed to be in syndication. This is one of them. Another one has to do with the Japanese internment camps and everything else. But this one in particular also has to do with discrimination and making assumptions about a group of people with literally no evidence whatsoever and then acting on those assumptions incorrectly. I'll just put it like that. Um, and in this case, what happens is there are electrical issues in a small town that turn neighbor against neighbor, believing them to be an alien from outer space. But then it turns out that it was literally just an electrical issue and no one was actually an alien. This is one of those um, where I felt like the ending didn't quite land for me. It should have gone darker. It could have gone darker. Why didn't it? Um, Similar to the King's Ransom for me, or the Lady Anne episode, where it just didn't go as far as it could have. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to make it that instead of these electrical issues, that the government is doing this experiment on purpose. Um, because they want to see what would happen and they're using a small town as an example. They want to see what would happen if aliens were to visit. Um, how would a small town behave and treat this invasion or this visit from aliens from outer space? What they don't, um, what they didn't consider is the reactions of the people in this small town. So my idea is that what ends up happening is everyone in the small town ends up dead, killing each other because they believe each other to be aliens. So that in reality, when the aliens come to visit, they come down and they see all these dead people and they're like, okay, they are not as smart or as intelligent as we originally thought. There's nothing we can do here or gain from this society, from this civilization, and the aliens leave. Um, but a twist on a twist. What if all of this happens and then we discover that the government had already done this experiment? This isn't the first experiment. This is the actual thing that they now just do. Every time they get an inkling that an alien is coming to visit, they have a long list of these small towns where they play this trick on them where they know that the aliens are going to go and going to land, and they play this trick on them so that they end up killing each other and the aliens end up leaving it. And this is how the government has chosen to prevent alien invasion. um yeah, so that's my idea for that Twilight Zone episode of the Monsters of the One Maple Street. I would need a different title. I don't like that one. I feel like there could be a better one, but it just gave me a little bit of a chuckle. I don't know if that would land very well with a lot of people today, with the government intentionally allowing a small town to obliterate themselves for the sake of not having an alien invasion. But you know, why not? Um, and then really quickly, I want to go over the maybes. So I've got three maybes here. Um, and again, I don't know if I'm going to end up doing anything with them. I do have how I would reimagine them, but I don't know if I'm married to it yet. So one of them is the Bewitching Pool, which I love. I must have all the Twilight Zone episodes. It's one of the few, surprisingly enough, that I've seen more than the others. Um, and if you're not familiar, the Bewitching Pool is about two kids who um, have this amazing, gorgeous pool in their backyard, and they're in the sweet neighborhood, really nice house, the whole bit. But their parents argue all the time. They're constantly fighting, and the boy, um, it's a brother and sister, young brother and sister, and they're so annoyed that the parents are always fighting, and it drives them nuts. So one day the sister decides, let's play an imaginary game where, if we swim down to the bottom of the pool, we'll end up in this world, this paradise with other kids playing, and it'd be awesome. So they play this game, and this hick boy comes up from the center of their pool, starts talking to them, and says, "Come on, let's go play." And they go, and they end up on the other side when they come up, and they're in this, lake. There are all these kids playing, and there's this old lady who lives in a house, and she's baking a big chocolate cake, and she's letting the kids put this chocolate icing on the whole bit. The sister is constantly calling and saying the boy to her brother, we gotta go back to the parents. So my idea, because to this day, I always feel like the ending is what's in my head, but it's not actually the ending. So in my head, the ending is the two children go back, right? And the parents finally stop arguing long enough to realize that their children are missing. And they go looking for them, and they find them in the pool, drowned, dead, because these kids went back to the other side and they would never be able to return. But no matter how many times I watch that episode, that's not actually how it ends, which, which I don't understand, because I swear to you, in my mind, that's the ending that I see. I see the parents are calling out for the kids and, saying, "Where are they? Where are they?" And they both, parents are side by side. They go to the pool. They look at the pool, and there are the floating bodies of the two dead kids. Why is that not how the episode ends? I don't know. So I'm thinking a great ending would be the kids dive into the pool, the parents go looking for them and find them drowned. So, but I need more to the story than that, right? The other thing that bothered me is the old woman who's on the other side is way too nice. I think she needs to be nice in the beginning, but when they return, she needs to turn into what she really is, which is a woman who kidnaps kids and turns them into her slaves, right? Um, and like those are the main pieces of this puzzle that I feel like needs to change. And the other one is, do Martians take the bus? Um, Now, the only reason why I even wrote this one down is because I've been watching a lot of Murder She Wrote, and without going around the beating around the bush too long, there's a Murder She Wrote episode that is very similar to this one, except there are no aliens in the Murder She Wrote episode. Essentially, in um, the Murder She Wrote episode, the bus breaks down. They end up at this diner. Um, all the passengers on the bus end up in this diner. One of the passengers on the bus ends up dead. Who killed him? So now JB Fletcher has to figure out who killed the dude um, on the bus. It's obviously one of the passengers who's now hanging out in the diner. And then in the Twilight Zone episode, it's a bus breaks down. They all go to this diner. Two uh, deputies come to the diner to say there was an unidentified flying object overhead. We think that whoever was in it, an alien, came into this diner. One of you are aliens. Okay, normal everyday occurrence, right? So, what if I did a bit of a change to it? Or what if I combined it basically, where I combined it with a murder mystery? Because the alien one from the Twilight Zone doesn't really have a murder mystery. No one dies in that episode. It's just one of them is an alien. Whereas the J.B. Fletcher episode is someone dies in it, but there's no alien. So what if I slap those two ideas together, where it's a bus that breaks down, someone dies, um, and potentially an alien is the one who's the murderer? It seems a bit too hokey, a bit too silly, so that's why it's in my maybe category. And then the last one is Night Call, where an elderly woman receives a phone call from a mysterious voice. She screams, "Leave me alone," multiple times. And then later she discovers that the calls are from her fiance's grave, um, who does whatever she says, so he leaves her alone and hangs up, right? So uh, she keeps getting this. I remember when I watched the episode, I thought, this is just weird. So she constantly receives this phone call just from her room, from the phone in her room, and she picks it up, and the person is unintelligible. She can't really understand what they're saying, obviously, because he's in a grave. He can't really speak, I guess. Um, and then she finally screams into the phone, like, "Leave me alone." And when they show you the grave of her husband, we see that there was like a phone there. I'm trying to remember how the episode ends, and I think that's what it is. The last scene or whatever, they show you that, and she realizes that he always does what she says, so leaves her alone. How would I reimagine that? What if her husband, who always does whatever she says, is directed by her, clear miscommunication to kill her? Um, and I put actually in my reimagining, I wrote, now wouldn't that be some shit? Because I was like, that would be crazy if she didn't realize what she was saying. Um, and something that she says makes him, who's dead in a grave, believe that she wants him to kill her. Um, and so now she's terrified because she realizes that she's been talking to her dead husband, who always does what she says, and she just accidentally told him to kill her, and she's this invalid old woman in bed who can't really move or go anywhere, and she hears someone break into her house and is coming up the stairs to her bedroom, right? Like that's my um, idea for that one, which now that I'm saying it to you, I actually think there's more there than I realized, so I'm going to actually move this up, um, and give it more attention than I did before. But leaving that aside now, I've told you, I think that's 15 different stories. Um, Now I've got to pick one because I want to start writing one, and I want to start writing it today. Uh, I want to write like 500 words. I've just talked myself to death. But which one should I start with? Should I start with A World of Her Own? Should I start with The Walkie Talkies? Almost Too Late. It Was Never a Good Life. The King's Ransom. Don't Touch That Dial. Little Girl Found. Or All That Was Needed. I've got to tell you, after talking to you, and all of you wonderful listeners in the room, my my gut is down to two of them, which is crazy to me because one of them is the one that needs a title. So I really like the After Hours, but I just need a better title, not a different title, where it's the mother who goes to the department store and everyone in the department store is a mannequin, which is different from the original where it's a mannequin in a department store with all real people. Um, I really like that idea, but so I think the one that I could really get behind is Almost Too Late or the walkie-talkies. Now, I'll tell you why. The walkie-talkies to me, I think is going to be a short one. I can't see myself writing more than like 5,000 words on that one. So I think that's one that I could um, easily wrap up and do what I intended to do with that one. And then I like almost too late because it does something different than what the other ones would essentially do, which is it really takes a moment in time from the original episode and forces me to use it in this one when the brother and sister cross paths, however briefly, with the couple in the original. And I like that idea. I also like the King's Ransom. I know someone in here said that that was a pretty good twist. Um, so it really is down to the walkie-talkies or almost too late, with the King's Ransom coming in close third. Um, but I think just because, but that episode of where did I put it? Night Call is really calling to me now. Now that I explained it to you guys what happens. Okay, so let's move my favorite ones up to the top just because I didn't wanna forget what I did here. So we're looking at Night Call, we're looking at the walkie talkies, we're looking at Almost Too Late and the King's Ransom. So I think these four are going to be the four that I start writing. I'm not going to start writing all four. I mean, in some order here, the next four short stories you get from me is going to be coming from uh, this bunch here, and then I'll look at the rest later. Um, and I might actually like the order that I just so randomly put them in, which is Night Call, then the Walkie Talkies, then Almost Too Late, then the King's Ransom. Let's go with that order. Um, I have been on here for a while. I apologize. I don't even know how long I've been on here. I think I might have been on here for an hour, if not longer than an hour. I can't believe it. So, thank you all for indulging me and letting me talk this out. I know, right? I Caro, is that how you pronounce your name? Like I was looking at all of these this morning. I've been looking at them all day, but not until you say them out loud and speak them out into the universe, even speaking it to a room full of people or a room full of no one, which is what I would normally do. I would be talking to myself in my office. Um, did it bubble up the memories of when I originally came up with the idea? Was so excited at the time when I came up with it, but then you let weeks and months go by and it loses that sense of spark. But now that even the ones that I put in the maybe pile, I'm starting to want to bring them back from the maybe pile. Except for Do Marshes Take the Bus. I think that was too silly. Um, I don't know what I was thinking. Trying to put Murder She Wrote and the Twilight Zone together. I don't think that works. Um, but I think all the other ones are just bangers. That's just me being gassing myself up. Um, you guys might have listened to all of these and said, "Boy, these all suck." I don't know what she was thinking. Um, in any event, I'm going to go and I'm going to do a more fleshed out outline. And I'm actually going to bring you guys what my outline would look like. I typically do, when it's a novel, I do two outlines, sometimes three, but I do a simple outline and a detailed outline. And the simple outline is almost like a three-act situation. And then the detailed outline is how I break down each chapter. It helps me when I'm writing a novel. But a short story, I just do a simple outline. I don't need a detailed one. But my simple outline will be pretty long, usually half or if not three-fourths of what the length of the actual short story will be. Like that's how long my simple outlines are. I like to leave myself very little wiggle room, even though I wiggle a lot when I start writing. So tomorrow I'll probably come back on here and I'll do like a part two to how the next thing will be not how I choose a story, but how I now outline once I've chosen the story that I'm going to write next. So I'll come back on here hopefully tomorrow and share the outline with you guys. Let you see how it looks, and then maybe I'll do a bit of uh sprint. I wanted to do some sprint time with you guys today, but I think I've been on here long enough. So going to get off here for now. I still haven't decided if this whole idea thing should be an hour, 2 hours. I'm used to Twitch. I'm a Twitch streamer, so I could be on Twitch for 4, 5, 6 hours. But I don't know if Substack is that kind of forum to be live on here for that long. So tomorrow I'm going to try to condense it because I'm only going to be talking about one story. So I'll share the outline for the one story, and then I'll carve out a little chunk at the end to do a bit of sprinting, and let's see if we can get a couple hundred words down in the story. But thank you to everyone who is here. I really appreciate it. I will be sharing this in my Erica Drayton Writes Fiction newsletter under Notes from a Writer. So if you subscribe to my newsletter, make sure you are in the section, have the section checked off for Notes from a Writer so you can get this. Well, I'm going to put a little bit of a descriptor at the bottom of what we just did here. So I will hopefully catch you guys tomorrow. Thank you, everyone, for helping me again figure out what I'm going to write next. Till then, or till later. Bye.